Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a document of profound global significance. We're looking at the Iran-US deal, specifically all the key agreements. Now, for this session, we're going to take a calm, deeply analytical approach. We're stepping back from the daily news cycle to look exclusively at the structural anatomy of this deal. This is a framework designed to completely reshape geopolitical realities, and understanding it requires looking closely at the actual negotiated text. So let's dive right in. What we're looking at is the primary 14-point source document. And the first thing to understand is that these points aren't just a random list of demands. They are heavily, intricately interlocked. It's really like a giant puzzle where each condition serves as a strict prerequisite for the next. To truly grasp the mechanics of this proposed framework, we have to look at how all these elements weave together to form a single binding agreement. To navigate these 14 sequential points, we've grouped them into a few logical chapters. We'll start with an introduction to the agreement, followed by ceasefire and maritime security. Next, we'll cover economic relief and nuclear terms, then compliance and UN endorsement, before finally looking at the global and regional impact. Let's start with Chapter 1, Ceasefire and Maritime Security, which covers points 1 through 5 of the agreement. The agreement begins with point 1, the ceasefire, and the text here is incredibly explicit. It's totally uncompromising. It mandates a ceasefire that is both immediate and permanent. Plus, it defines the geographic scope very broadly. This applies across all fronts, and the document actually makes a specific note to include Lebanon. This is the foundational first step, completely halting all active direct hostilities. Building directly on top of that ceasefire is point 2, the Sovereignty Pact. This establishes a clear framework of bilateral non-interference. Now, the absolutely crucial thing to note here is that this isn't a one-sided demand. It is explicitly binding on both sides. It legally requires both the United States and Iran to respect mutual sovereignty, meaning neither side can interfere in the other's internal or external affairs. Then we hit point 3, which puts a ticking clock on the whole thing. It sets a strict deal deadline of exactly 60 days. This creates a highly compressed pressure cooker window for all the subsequent points to be enacted and verified. However, there is an important caveat. That 60-day deadline is extendable, but only by mutual consent. So neither party can unilaterally drag out the process just to stall. They both have to agree. Points 4 and 5 map out a strictly overlapping timeline to secure maritime security. It's a highly choreographed sequence. Within the first 30 days, 2 major things have to happen. The naval blockade must be lifted, and all obstacles in the Strait of Hormuz have to be completely cleared out. Hitting that 60-day mark, the agreement requires guaranteed free commercial passage through the strait. And finally, looking post-deal, U.S. forces are mandated to exit 30 days after the final deal is officially concluded. Moving on to Chapter 2, Economic Relief and Nuclear Terms, which encompasses points 6 through 11. Point 6 tackles the Reconstruction Fund, and the scale here is literally staggering. The agreement stipulates a minimum of $300 billion for this fund. That's a foundational economic pillar of this deal. It's designed to guarantee massive capital for rebuilding efforts, setting a hard, non-negotiable financial floor at $300 billion. Next up is point 7, focusing on sanctions removal. The language used in the document here leaves absolutely no room for interpretation. All sanctions are to be lifted, and that doesn't just mean U.S. sanctions. It explicitly lists the U.S., the UN, and the IAEA, covering both primary and secondary sanctions. It is a total, comprehensive unwinding of the international economic pressure campaign against Iran. Now, we really have to look at points 8 and 9 together because they handle the nuclear terms across 2 entirely different timelines. Point 8 is the long-term goal, absolutely zero nuclear weapons, with existing enriched stock downblended under strict IAEA supervision. Point 9, on the other hand, is the interim nuclear freeze. For the immediate term, the status quo is held. So in exchange for freezing nuclear advancement right now, the U.S. agrees to 0 new sanctions and 0 new forces deployed. It's essentially a temporary holding pattern to allow that long-term downblending to safely get underway. Point 10 returns to immediate economic relief, specifically targeting the energy sector. It mandates immediate, day 0 Treasury waivers for all oil and petroleum exports. That means from the very first second this agreement is active, the legal mechanisms blocking Iranian oil from hitting the global market are waived. Immediate commercial export is allowed. Wrapping up the economic chapter is point 11, frozen assets. Much like the sanctions removal, the wording here is absolute. It requires 100% of frozen Iranian funds to be fully released. Every single dollar previously locked up in international accounts has to be made completely accessible to Iran. No partial measures whatsoever. Next is Chapter 3, Compliance and UN Endorsement. This covers points 12 through 14. So, how do you actually make sure both sides follow through on all of this? Well, point 12 sets up a specific mechanism for compliance monitoring. The agreement dictates the creation of a joint executive monitoring body. This ensures that the timelines, the military withdrawals, and those massive economic releases are overseen not just by one side, but jointly. Now, point 13 is arguably the structural linchpin of the entire document. It outlines the negotiation trigger conditions. It explicitly states that further talks can begin only after 5 very specific clauses are implemented. It's a strict checklist. Number 1, point 1, the ceasefire. Number 2, point 4, lifting the naval blockade. Number 3, point 5, securing the Strait of Hormuz. Number 4, point 10, granting oil export waivers. And number 5, point 11, releasing frozen assets. If those 5 foundational steps aren't complete, the broader negotiations are completely paralyzed. And finally, we reach point 14, UN endorsement. The 14-point document concludes by stating that a binding UN Security Council resolution is required for the final deal. This is massive because it elevates the bilateral agreement into international law, making the terms officially binding under the highest diplomatic authority on the planet. Which brings us to Chapter 4, Global and Regional Impact. How do these 14 interlocking points actually translate into wider geopolitical reality? Well, the impact of this deal really spans 3 major focus areas. First, for regional stability, point 1's permanent ceasefire across all fronts fundamentally halts immediate conflict. Second, when you look at global energy markets, the combination of those day zero oil waivers and a secured, free-flowing Strait of Hormuz, that represents a massive shift in global petroleum supply chains. And third, for international diplomacy, the strict requirement of a binding UNSC resolution paired with a joint monitoring body institutionalizes this whole agreement at the absolute highest levels of global governance. We've just walked through the structural anatomy of this historic framework, from the immediate military stand-downs to the staggering economic shifts, all the way to those strict negotiation triggers. But as we all know, a document is only ever as strong as the willingness to uphold it. So I'll leave you with this thought. As these 14 highly conditional, interlocking points attempt to radically reshape the geopolitical landscape, how will the international community practically enforce and maintain such a remarkably comprehensive mandate over the long term? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer.